Homesteads and Homeschools is part of the Liberty Hippie Podcast Network. If you like what we do, be sure to check out This Week in Liberpods, Peace Freaks, Cannabis Heals Me, and Free Market's Green Earth. We're living proof that libertarian doesn't mean washed up Republican.
What's up, people? Welcome back again to Homesteads and Homeschools. I am your host again, the Liberty Hippie, here with you for another week again. 3 times I said again. And as you might have heard at the beginning, me making chicken noises, it's going to be an episode about chickens because it's been a long time coming. A couple people have asked, and I asked friend of the show, Senor Dagorist, to come on and help me out. We talked a lot about chickens and basically kind of getting into chickens and some things to consider, some things to think about, and check it out. Give it a listen. If you are thinking about chickens, if you have chickens, if you know somebody getting into chickens, give it a listen. They'll appreciate it. Mostly talked about layers this time around. We may do an episode in the future talking about meat birds, because meat birds are fun. I don't know about fun. They're not fun. They're useful, very useful, because you can put a lot of meat in your freezer fairly quickly, and it's tasty and good for you. So, of course, this is episode number 78, which means you can find the show notes at homesteadsandhomeschools.com/078. So let's call it right there. Let's get into it. Let's go plant those liberty seeds with my guest, Senor Dagorist.
I'm on the ball today. I even felt exempted from the law today. It's like this revelation dawned on me. It's so amazing, help support the cause. I get everyone involved. I feel like I'm on the ball today. I even felt exempted from the law today. It's like this revelation dawned on me. It's so amazing, help support the cause. I get everyone involved.
Yeah, today I have with me a special guest, a special friend of the show. And we're going to have a chicken-centric episode because somebody asked for that and I was in a bind, and here we go. He's here to help me out. So Dag over there at the Agorist Nexus podcast is here today to talk all about chickens. So Dag, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
So, you know a fair bit about chickens. I would say you know a lot about chickens. I'm guessing you probably would say, like, I don't know anything about chickens, but I think that's just your personality. I don't know. Anyway, what do you have for chickens? What do you guys do for chickens?
So I guess we got started probably a little over 3 years ago with birds. I had them as a kid and whatnot. But we have a small farm. We run it as a business, and we do pasture-raised poultry products. We do eggs. We do meat broilers. And we also do heritage breed turkeys for Thanksgiving as well. And then a few other randos. We've got a goose and a duck, and they're kind of just for fun. But yeah, that's what we're doing for now. We're definitely looking to expand. I want to get a good duck flock going here in the future for duck eggs. But yeah, man, we stay pretty busy. We're taking our summer break right now. It just gets too damn hot down here for the birds.
Yeah.
But yeah, we definitely stay busy with them.
Good deal. So how many layers do you have on hand?
Sorry, they're hard to count.
Yeah.
Probably about 3 dozen right now. I definitely need to bump those numbers up, but that's where we're at currently.
Quite a bit there. So, and then you do the broilers. When you do a batch of meat chickens, how many will you do at a time?
We usually do in the neighborhood of between 50 and 100 in any given batch, and their run is about 8 weeks. So we normally have, let's say average like 75 at a time going. We do the big mobile pens, a la Joe Soliton style, and we run them over pasture, so they get moved every day. They're getting fresh grass, fresh bugs, spreading the manure around. It's a really cool system. It works out really well.
Very cool. I'll have to talk about that. But so I guess somebody's thinking about getting chickens, right? Where do you go to get them?
Well, there's a lot of places you can go. You can do something as simple as just look on Craigslist or whatever marketplace kind of thing you prefer. And a lot of times you can find them on there. A note: I have had very poor results doing that, and I've had very good results. So you're never really 100% sure what you're going to get as far as the quality of the person breeding them or the breeds, or if it's just somebody doing them, they might be inbred or something. So
Mm-hmm.
that is an easy way to go. You can always go down to your local like farm store, Tractor Supply or Rural King or whatever, and they'll sell them as well. Um, my preference is to order them from a hatchery. Normally, what you're going to get really good customer service a lot of times if you have an issue. And you have really good selection stuff as well. So that's usually my preference. They come in the mail. They're day old chicks. It's really incredible that they can just ship them like that. I was really nervous about doing that for the longest time. But if you go get them at Tractor Supply, they got shipped there in the mail. So what's the difference?
Yeah, and that's what you think about that. When they get shipped to your, I don't know, Tractor Supply, your Rural King, or whatever you want to call it, they've been in the mail just as long, if not longer. 'Cause they sit on the floor waiting to get divvied out into their
Right.
selling tanks, I guess. But yeah, I've always bought them online through a hatchery, and we've always had decent luck. And they every hatchery I've ever dealt with has been very responsive to like a dead chick in the box. They'll refund your money pretty quickly without much hassle. So that is nice. I think the minimum order is usually around like 15, because I think based on like federal guidelines, like you have to have a certain number, maybe, or maybe it's just like weather permitting. But
Yeah, I think that it's because they need a certain amount of heat, so they
yeah,
have to have enough of them in a box together. So like so one hatchery particular that I deal with a lot, if you order a small number, let's say like half a dozen or something, they'll throw in like a couple random male chicks just to add heat to the box. So you might actually end up getting more than you wanted, but just because they need that body mass to keep them warm.
yeah, I didn't. I think the smallest I've ever seen was like 15 birds allowable. So that's who do you know who could?
Um, Ideal does that, but I think that that's also like, let's say you order 50 birds, but 15 or so of each variety. They'll put them in boxes that are divided, and then they'll do what's called like a small box fee. So it'll be like any
Okay,
order under like 100 chickens of a particular variety is like an extra $7.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, and I think even at like your local Tractor Supply or whatever, they have minimum orders. I know like here in Georgia, I think you have the minimum is 6 chickens and then 2 ducks. And I think when you're in Vermont, it might have been, Georgia's 4. And I think Vermont was 6. I don't know, but
Yeah, and I'm not 100% sure why that is. I'm not sure if it's just they want to move them out, or I don't know if it's also like an animal welfare thing. Like there's some places like you can't just list free animals. You have to at least charge a couple bucks because they don't want people to pick up free animals and abuse them. So I don't know if it has something to do with that, or maybe it's just weird selling 2 chickens.
that's because I asked once upon a time, and that was the response that I got, that like they're required by law to sell X number
Oh wow,
because you
I didn't
can't.
realize it's an actual law.
Yeah, but that's what they told me. They're not allowed to sell individuals because I don't know. You're gonna have a lonely chicken, I guess.
I guess they are kind of social.
So you get your chickens home, and what do you do for your chickens? Where do you keep them when they're first born, first hatched, I guess?
Yeah, you're going to want what's called a brooder if they're still really young and they're not feathered yet, because they need to maintain certain body heat until they get their feathers in. So, a small box, and this is the kind of thing where the rules are kind of simple, but, however you make it work for your situation. So some sort of small box with a heat source, usually a heat lamp. I really like the ceramic heating elements that don't have the light, because then they, get a bedtime. The easy thing with having a light though is you can just see from a distance that it's on and everything's working and they're warm. But at any rate, a small box. Depending on your climate, if you're somewhere where it's colder up north, you might want something a little more enclosed. I'm way down, the bottom of Florida, so it's pretty hot, and I like to have mine a little bit open with plenty of airflow. Um, but they stay warm enough, so it's not a problem. So that's the big thing. You want a decent little thermometer in there to keep an eye on them, and yeah, you want them in the 90s. And then as they get older, you can bump that temperature down a little bit, and usually you can just keep an eye on them and tell if they're hot enough or warm enough or not. If they're all huddled together in a group under the heat source, they might be a little cold. If they're out, spread out, running around, you probably got a pretty good temperature going on. And having two different zones in the brooder is fine too. A place they can go to get warm, a place over, that they can go run around, and they're resilient. They figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think it's interesting. One way to figure it out, you watch, just watching them, and if they're all bundled up in mass and, you got to turn it up. If they're all crazy spread out, they're probably doing okay. And then,
Yeah, it's easy to fret over them, but they, as you've had, just like a random chicken will just sit on eggs and hatch them, and it's just a chicken belly that's keeping them warm, and they do fine. They're pretty resilient.
Yeah, it's a good deal. What do you feed them in the beginning? You just give them special food? Is there chick food, or what do you do?
Yeah, I get you want to get a chick food. You want to get something high in protein. I usually start them off from like a 20 to 24%, whatever's available. And one thing that I don't do is I do not give them a medicated feed. I try to do things more naturally, and I want them to develop immunity on their own. So I don't like to give them a medicated feed unless you're in a big industrial setup with hundreds of birds and a small space. It's just not necessary. One thing though that you may find, and this is my experience with my first batch, is when you have a new clean brooder that no chickens have ever been in before, there's none of that, there's none of that, there's no little bit of disease in there already, so they don't really develop an immunity. So what unfortunately is kind of common is your first batch in a new clean brooder to actually lose a few. But when you do your next batch and you clean the brooder, you don't want to clean it all the way. Get most of the shavings out of there, but leave some of the old shavings in there. And that way there's just a little bit of, I don't know if it's bacteria or virus, but a little bit of a disease load in there, enough to get them an immunity, and you'll end up with stronger chickens in the future. So definitely be aware of that, and don't get discouraged if you have issues your first time.
Yeah. So two things. I think when we have chicks, we always, make sure to throw some dirt in their feed and throw some grass and other little things in there that they can kind of nibble on. And hopefully that introduces some of the outside environment into their environment.
Yeah. And that's actually a great point. That's something I didn't mention is, I always make sure they have greens. So every day I go out and I pull some grass, I pull some clover or daisies or, whatever's growing, and throw some in there, because you definitely want them to have some greens, especially because hopefully you're going to be getting them out onto some sort of yard or pasture in the future. And that's something that they're going to have. They find that if chickens eat grass, they don't get things like avian flu and stuff like that. So it's really a good thing. Just, just like yourself, if you just sit around and eat, food that comes out of a factory and never eat, any greens, you're going to have a bad time. So, same kind of thing.
Yeah. Right on. Do you ever get your chickens vaccinated when you order them? Because I know a lot of places will offer I forget what it is. I think Merrick's is one, and then there's I don't know if you can get them vaccinated for.
Is it the one that starts with a C?
I don't know.
I can never pronounce that word.
Do they vaccinate for coccidiosis? And then I think there was something else. I can't remember.
I think that might be what the medicated feed does. There's going to be a couple things they offer. Another thing that they offer a lot of times is de-beaking, where they actually remove like the end of the beak from the chicken. And most good hatcheries will even advise, unless you're doing in a chicken house, a big industrial thing, the vaccinations aren't necessary. The de-beaking definitely isn't necessary. And if you're raising the chickens in a situation, because the reason they de-beak them is so they don't eat each other. Because they're in such a stressed environment. So if you're raising chickens in a way that they need to be de-beaked, I'm going to say you need to go ahead and start over. Because that's if you're raising chickens yourself, that's not the kind of thing you're looking to do. You're looking to avoid the industrial food process. Now. So
yeah, all right, yeah, because that's always one that I order them and I'm reading it. I'm like, I don't want to get them vaccinated, and there's just scary disclaimers sometimes, what these diseases will do. And then you think about it though, when you have them and you hatch chicks out on their own, they're not vaccinated and they always seem to do fairly well. And, I think it's one of those, as long as you have them in a healthy environment, as long as they're not, super stressed, it's generally speaking.
Sunshine and fresh air, man, does wonders.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you use for for litter in your brooders? Do you use wood chips, shavings, hay? What do you do?
Yeah, I use just the pine shavings that we get from for Tractor Supply. Come in a big bale, or not a
Yeah.
huge bale. I can't fit it in your car, but they come in a big bale. It's like $5. There's a ton of them in there, so I use those. And then from there, when you remove the chips from the brooder, you can use them as a mulch. You can put them in your compost bin, something like that, and they're going to be really good for that. One thing that you want to keep in mind in the brooder is you really want to use your nose. If you can smell, an ammonia smell, or you can
Mm-hmm.
smell waste, you need to put new chips in there. And, depending on the size of your brooder, you don't necessarily even have to clean out old ones. Just put a layer on top. But just remember that the birds have a very sensitive respiratory system. And if you can smell ammonia, it's too much for them. So you want to get some more wood chips in there. Depending on the amount of birds and the density, once a day, sometimes twice a day once they start getting bigger, especially the broiler varieties, because they just
Yeah.
eat and poop so much.
It is amazing. The first time we did broilers, I could not believe how much they just ate and pooped.
It's
That's
weird,
it.
isn't it? Like when you're so used to the regular heritage breeds, and then you get some broilers in there, and they grow so fat, and they grow faster than their feathers, and they're like
Yeah.
weird looking birds, man.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, I got my chicks in the brooder. They're growing. They're getting bigger. When can I put them outside? Because I got to get them out of the house.
Yeah, you got to get them out of the house. As soon as possible. And a lot of this is going to depend on what time of year it is and your location. You want to make sure it's warm enough for them. So for me down here, unless it's like nighttime in the winter, once they're like 2 weeks old, I can usually start working them out a little bit. And again, this can be how you design your coop. You can have a brooder area that also opens to the outside, so they can go out in the day. But you want to be very careful when they're young of things like aerial predators.
Mhm.
Because they'll swoop down and take them. So either be out there with them when you let them out, or you can use like a netting over them to give them some protection. Or another reason that I really like mobile kind of pens is because when you just have one area, they get out there, they poop it up after a certain amount of time, they eat all the grass. But when you have something mobile, you can just move it. So I actually have a few very small chicken tractors that I'll use for some of the younger chicks to get them out on grass a little bit earlier. But yeah, usually a couple weeks. Probably worst case scenario 4 weeks. One thing you can watch for is their feathers growing in. Once their down starts to go away and they actually get some feathers covering them up, man,
Mhm.
they're good. They can handle pretty much anything once they get feathers, and that's just going to depend on variety when that happens.
Yeah, we just hatched some out mid-June. It was about mid-June, and by the end of June, about the 4th of July, sometime in there, the mama hen had like totally left them. Like they were on their own out in the chicken pen, like doing their thing, and they had some feathers on their wings, but that was about it. And I don't know if mom was just not a good mother or what, but they did fine. They did all right. I was surprised that they were kind of on their own that young, but
Yeah, they figure it out. As long as you keep the predators off of them, I mean, there's not much that's gonna take them out. They're very resilient.
so I guess how old are chickens when they start laying eggs?
That's going to vary a little bit based on variety. You can get some of your more egg, bred for specific like commercial egg laying, and they might be as ready as in as little as like 4 months. I tend to find about 5 or so months, give or take a month, before they start laying. You'll get a few small eggs here or there, but then after a couple months, they'll kind of build up to their normal size. Once the chicken gets to be like 2 years old, you get the big jumbos, But yeah, usually plan for about 5 to 6 months out from when you get your chickens to when you can start expecting to have eggs regularly.
When do you get your laying chicks then? Do you get them in the spring because then they come to lay about fall and the sun's getting less and they're not laying as many eggs, or do you get them in the fall and try to take them through the winter, or so springtime rolls around and they're just egg laying machines? Or what do you think about that?
Me personally, not really, but again, climate. If you live in Maine or something, yeah, you're gonna want to get them in the spring. Once it starts warming up a little bit, and then that way they can grow up through the summer, and then by the time winter comes, they'll be good and hardy, and they'll be able to handle winter. If you get them in the middle of winter in Maine, I imagine shipping must be a rough rough experience for them. But yeah, you're gonna have to be a lot more. They're gonna stay in the brooder longer and this and that, which you'll want to get them out in that fresh air sooner. So I'd probably recommend getting them in spring. Down here for me, man, whenever I have availability in pens and brooders and I feel like getting chickens, I just order them because It's the opposite down here. Summer is a lot harder on us here than the winter for sure.
Yeah, that's something I'm learning.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a big reversal for you, huh?
Yeah. So, when can I get them off the chick feed? And what do I start feeding them then?
So I'll bump them down from like a 24% down to like a 20% after a few weeks. I don't know, maybe a month or so. And then after a couple months, I'll bump them down to like a 15%. Or when you get them, if they're layers, you get them over onto a layer feed. That's normally about a 16 to 18%. So just after a couple months, you can bump them down to whatever they're going to be on. But when they're still actively growing, I like to make sure they have at least a 20% because that protein is going to help them. And then I also give them, scratch grains, which, it's some people look at it as almost even like a treat. Like it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of, protein in those grains. I like them because they're cheap. So I kind of mix them in with their feed a little bit too and help break it up. But one thing that's good about the scratch is if you have them out on the yard and, you're toss it out there with your hands, it gives them something to do. It gives them activity. They're going to go around. They're going to find little pieces. They're going to eat it up. They're going to start using their legs to scratch at the ground. So it can also be like training. Or if I like to use chickens for utility purposes. So if I got an area that's all grass and weeds and I want it tore up, I'm not going to break out a tiller. I'm going to put a pen around it, put a bunch of chickens out there and throw some scratch out there every day and let them do their work. And after a month or so, that ground's pretty clean. And then I can come in and plant grass or whatever I want to do with it. But yeah, man, as like I said, it's just getting them out on the grass and pasture is very important in my opinion. So once you can get them out into the yard, that's gonna help with your feed a bit. And then once they're grown, once they're laying eggs and everything, you just want to keep them on a regular layer feed. Sometimes, especially like when they go through their yearly molt, which is going to happen when they lose all their feathers or a lot of their feathers once a year. There's probably nothing wrong with them. It's just a natural thing. Give them something with a little extra protein to help them grow those feathers back. And they sell particular feeds for that. They call it like feather fixer and stuff, where it's going to be a layer feed with a little more protein. So you can do that, but generally don't freak out too much about making sure you're feeding them the exact right percentage, the exact right time. They're critters that have been around for a long time, and it wasn't that long ago. People didn't have that kind of choice in the feed. So, do what you think is right and take it from there. But don't freak out too much about it. It's very normal to when you first get into this to think everything has to be, scientifically formulated for a 7.5-week-old chicken. And it's just not the case.
Yeah. Do you give them cracked corn or do you stick with the scratch grains or what do you?
Yeah, there's cracked corn in with the scratch grains. So we just give it to them. I don't necessarily mix up my own scratch or anything, but yeah, I mean if you go that route, cracked corn is really cheap too, so it can really help bump up your protein while keeping your feed cost down as well.
All right. There's something. Oh yeah, molting chickens, man. They're funny looking objects when they decide to do that.
Yeah, I want to say most places they get like a regular winter. I think it normally happens in like maybe fallish. Ours tend to do it in the summertime. But I think in colder environments, I think it tends to happen in the fall. They probably shed their feathers to get ready for winter time with a new batch of feathers. I feel like I should know more about that, but it doesn't pertain to me as much. So
it's one of those things too. It's kind of doesn't change too much. They slow down laying. I think they probably stop, but
yeah, that'll happen, especially if it gets real cold. That'll happen in the winter. You'll get around through a few months of winter, though they will lay a bit less eggs, so be prepared for that. And again, don't freak out. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just what happens as the days get shorter. Their bodies adjust. Some people will give them light at nighttime, like in their coop, to make them lay more. But I mean, if you're a backyard farmer, obviously, or homesteader or whatever, I mean, don't worry about that. I don't think it's good for the chickens per se. I think that there's let them do their natural cycle.
Yeah, when I was a kid, when we had chickens as a kid, that's what we would do. We had two lights out there. One was underneath the water, so the water wouldn't freeze, and then we had a light that we would turn on and off to give them a little bit of extra and keep them laying through the winter. It's something I didn't do when we were in like Vermont, just because I don't know. It felt like just kind of let them do their thing, and jibe with the seasons on their own. But
yeah, and that's what I prefer. I mean, if you're trying to do, a which most people getting backyard chickens or whatever, that's what they're trying to do is be a little more. they're just trying to get out of the industrial kind of food thing and just have a more natural kind of setup. So I think that's definitely the best way to go, is just let them do their thing.
Right on. How long will the chicken lay eggs for? Do you know?
They will lay eggs for several years. I believe that most chickens have about 1,000 ovum in them. So that's like the most eggs that they can lay over their lifetime, is how many eggs they're born with inside of them. Usually the first 2 years is, a good, when they're laying the most. Once you hit that 2 year point, once they get through their second season, their egg laying definitely does drop back a little bit. So depending on your scenario, you're either going to have them as pets or you're going to, to get them off into the stew pot. But that's a very situational thing. If you got a bunch of kids and these are your first chickens, you might have a hard time, saying, hey, we're going to eat Henrietta. But when you have a ton of them and they all look the same, it's not that hard. You cycle them out, and new ones in.
Yeah, I know that well, but.
Yeah, and I mean, it depends on your parenting style too. Hey, how harsh are we going to teach lessons?
Yeah. Well, you start getting into the meat birds and stuff like that, and it kind of is part of it. It becomes.
Yeah, and once your first batch is always the hardest. And we did our first ones. We ate a few heritage breed ones, and it was a rough day processing them and everything. And they had to try really hard not to name them. But when it's your first like half a dozen chickens, they all end up with names and stuff. So it does get really tough. But once you've been doing it for a couple of years, it's a little more normalized for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't mind eating the roosters. Like that doesn't bother me. The hens I always feel bad about. I don't know why. It's just something they're like, But
it's they're females. They're sweet. When it's a rooster, it's like whatever. He wakes me up in the morning, and
I've yet to have a very friendly rooster. They're all kind of offstandish. But do you have to have a rooster? Do you have roosters?
Yeah, we definitely have roosters. You do not have to have a rooster by any means, and a lot of people, especially if you're doing a small backyard flock, and you're not really your neighbors might not appreciate you having a rooster, or your city might have ordinances against having a rooster. I personally like to have one just because it fills out the flock. They play their role. All the hens are around them eating, and they're sitting up there alert, watching out. And, it's neat, but it's not necessary for them to lay eggs or anything. If you want those eggs to hatch, like in an incubator, or for the hens to hatch them, you will need a rooster. But otherwise, no, they're not necessary. And depending on the family situation, if you have some real little kids or something, you might not want to risk having a mean rooster. But you don't need one by any means. But they are cool to have. They are fun. We've really only had one that was super friendly. Like, you'd walk up to it and it'd come up to you and insist on being picked up, and you pick it up and pet it, and it'd fall asleep in your arms. And but we've only ever had one like that. Fortunately, this go around, we haven't had any that are super mean either. I think as long as you give them enough space, they're normally fine.
Yeah, we I don't know. We've had a couple that have been like very unfriendly, and they don't last long. I actually got spurred by one at one point in time. I walked past it, and like I knew better than to do what I was doing, but I wasn't really thinking about it. And it wasn't cornered, but it definitely didn't have like an escape route. And it just kind of like jumped at me and spurred my thigh. And I had some couple deep puncture wounds. So I had to go get my tetanus shot for that. But
some of those spurs on those birds are massive.
They get big. They get real big. Yeah, I don't know. Do you leave the spurs on yours? I know some people will take them off.
Yeah, I leave them on. We looked into it at one point because we were having issues with some of the hens being how should I say this, mated too hard.
Yeah.
And they were getting cuts on them. And we've actually had some really we didn't realize the first time it happened. We didn't realize there was something wrong with the chicken. She was acting funny. We lifted up her wing, and I mean, there was no skin under her wing. Like, you could see organs and stuff. It was really, really awful. But man, I'll tell you what, dude, we washed it out with soap, isolated her. And a couple months later, couldn't even tell. She was fine. Ended up being a real sweet hen, maybe because she realized, oh, they saved me. They're really nice. We can pick her up. But I mean, so again, they are really resilient. But at any rate, we looked into it, and I don't know, man. It's just any of the methods that I saw was I just couldn't stomach doing it for the cause. If we had one that was that bad, I'd honestly feel better, which might be backwards. I'd feel better killing it and eating it, than I would. because it seemed kind of gruesome and painful. Maybe there's a better way, but I don't know. It's just not something I wanted to stomach.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the reasons we have roosters around is kind of give them a little bit of protection. And that's what the spurs are sort of for. Give a little bit of that.
Oh, you're getting a Georgia accent.
I know. I don't know what that was. I think I said spur and then for and fur, and I don't know. Leave it alone.
Yeah. But yeah, and they also make specific noises too. So again, from protection, even if they're not actively, like protecting the birds, it gives you a chance. If you're off in the distance and you sort of learn their noises, you hear their. I'm not even going to try to imitate it, but if you hear their specific, hey, there's a hawk flying overhead noise, or something that because hey, let me go check them out. And same thing at nighttime. If you hear them crowing at night, sometimes it's an indication that there's predators lurking around. So they can sort of just give you a heads up, let you know what's going on a little more, let you communicate with your flock a little bit better.
Yeah. I always had roosters around. That's I don't know.
Can I mention something about housing real quick?
Yeah, sure. By all means.
So when you do like your housing for your coops, you can certainly do something stationary, and this can depend a little bit on your setup and your land and everything. And there's there's just a few things they have to have, but otherwise coop builds are pretty open to however you want to design them. But if possible, I definitely like to recommend that people have a mobile option, even if it's not something that gets moved every day. Build something that can be moved to, let's say, a few, I don't know how big a property is, 50, 100 feet away, give them different areas to graze. And then that way it keeps them fresh. You're keeping the manure spread out, and it gives you options for where you want to put them. Because a lot of homesteaders, even if you're on a small space, you can use chickens for utility purposes. You can use them to weed eat, to to almost till an area to clear weeds out naturally. And then you can sort of control where they go. You can control where that manure ends up, and you can control what work you're having done with them. So consider a mobile option if it's possible for you. I have both. I have some stationary pens, and I have chicken tractors and other pens that, yeah, it's a little bit of a hassle, but I can always move them clear to the other side of the property if I want. So if you can incorporate something like that, I definitely like to do that.
Yeah, it's amazing how much they can mow down. Put them around the edge of the garden and just have them go around that, and it's wild what they can.
They will take it down to bare dirt.
Yeah, for real.
And they're picking out all the weed seeds in that that seed bank in your soil. So they're really gonna clean it up a bit for you in the future. And then if you plant there, you'll hopefully have less weed issues.
Yeah. In terms of predators, and it's going to be different, I think, in different areas. What do you do? Just keep your housing tight. I mean, how do you prevent predators? What do you have?
Yeah, so a lot of it's kind of start with something, and then if there's an issue, solve that problem that day. You're at some point, depending on where you're at, you're probably going to have a predator issue at some point, and that's okay. But if the same thing happens twice, that's on you. You need to handle it when it happens. It's your job is to take care of these birds. So the biggest predator issues are going to be when they're younger. You need to watch out for aerial predators, because that'll happen in the middle of the day. Most other predator problems are going to be a nighttime thing. So they're very habitual. You have them sleep in the same place for a few days or a week, they're going to come back every night. So, you have a chick coop for them. You lock them in there for a week. You deal with that. And then you can start letting them out, and they'll come back every night. So the best thing is have something with the door that you can close, have it sealed up kind of tight, again, depending on your predators. Down here, most of our predators are larger. Up north, where you have things like minks and, little smaller
Weasels,
predators, you might have a harder time. So you might have to just button things up tighter. If you have issues with things digging under, you might need a barrier fence, around the pen. I personally really like using electric fence. It's easy to use. It's pretty cheap. Takes a little bit of practice, getting the hang for how to set it up and everything. But, once a predator, and it can be a big predator, a fox or a coyote, it catches that electric fence on its nose one time, it's not coming back. So it can even be the kind of thing. A lot of times my electric fence it's out there, but it's not that set up. But if we do have issues with predators coming in, I'll go out, I'll spend, a day or whatever fixing it up, making it real secure. And then they might come back that night, but then we never see them again. So electric fence is a really good way to go. If you can afford it, what's really nice is the electric fence netting. It's light, it's easy to set up, it works very effectively, and it's easily movable. That's the set of the netting itself is like $160, and then you need a charger and stuff. So it does start to get up there in price versus just buying wire. But yeah, I can't say enough about electric fence. But I mean, honestly, for most people, if you have a good tight coop and you keep an eye on it, you'll be okay. But if you have an issue, you're just going to have to solve it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it can be intense. When we were in Vermont, we were in like very suburban area. We were on I think it was like a fifth of an acre. And, we had our chickens in the backyard and we left them out and they had a little home they'd go in, and we went out one morning and there was just feathers everywhere, and it was a fox. A fox had climbed like the fence, and like I have neighbors on all sides, except for one little spot where we face the road. And there's a fox like climbed over the fence. So even when you think things are secure or whatever, like there's holes that you'll figure out. And you just got to kind of deal with it.
And yeah, sometimes you don't realize where the weak spot is until something penetrates it, and a lot of times, like if you're in a suburban setup, your biggest issue is probably going to be your neighbor's dog.
Yeah.
So you got to be aware of stuff like that, and that's a whole neighborly relations issue that starts. So yeah, you really want to avoid that one.
Right on. Yeah, I hear you. And you mentioned weasels there. That's one that like people don't really think about a lot of the time because they are so little, like, it's the size of a red squirrel.
Yeah.
But they will wreak. Like when I was a kid, our flock just got decimated. Like they took it down from like 20 to 0 in no time. And I mean, that was just it. And there's nothing you could we couldn't figure out how to fight it. They were, we kept them penned in and they'd still figure out how to get in, and they wouldn't even eat them. They just kill them and like leave them there. It was really pretty horrific. So
yeah, I think they're one of those that if they just see like movement, they just attack it. So they get in there and all the chickens start running around and they just attack them all, kill them all. I mean, we had a coyote about a year ago that, we came out one morning and there were just 30 something chickens dead, like none of them eaten. They're just out there killing them for fun, I guess. I mean, it's a dog, what do you want from it? So yeah, it's rough.
All right. Well, I don't know. I think it's about good there. Yeah, I hope that people appreciated that. Because I know some people, it can be scary getting into chickens, but it's not that bad. So
it's just like anything, man. You get it, you mess a couple things up, and you learn from your mistakes, just like anything. So don't be scared. And it's so easy to overthink and fret about every little thing. Get you a book, give some stuff a try, and when you run into a problem, solve it, and you'll be a pro in no time.
For sure. All right. So where do we go to find you?
I co-host the Agorist Nexus podcast, where we talk about agorism. And it's a good time. And then I'm a Dagorist on like social media. So you've got your Keybase and Discord and stuff. I hang out on there a lot. So if anybody wants to come chat about chickens, come on down.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, man. Anytime, brother.
All right, guys. That was a friend of the show, Senor Dagorist. I don't know why I call him Senor. He's easier than calling him Mr. I guess. I don't know, but I did. I am, and I'm sticking with it. So there it is. Go check him out on Agorist Nexus. That's his podcast that he's starting to co-host, and lots of good stuff over there. Lots of very interesting stuff over there that I'm going to go ahead and guess that it might tickle your fancy. So if you haven't given them a listen yet, do that now. Go leave a review on iTunes. Check out patreon.com/thelibertyhippie. And of course, as always, I know you guys go to Amazon. Use my link. Just use the link. Go to homesteadsandhomeschools.com/Amazon. Click the link. Go to Amazon. Buy your junk. And I get a little kickback. It's not much, but I get something. And something is better than nothing, right? So go do that. And I guess that's all for today. If you guys have any show recommendations, anything you want to hear someone talk about, go on at length and kind of get into some of the some of the more nitty-gritty details of things, let me know. Send me an email, homesteadsandhomeschools@gmail.com, HS and HSpod on Twitter, or go to the show notes, homesteadsandhomeschools.com/078, and find the Keybase link and jump on over there and let me know. So that's all for today, guys. I hope you have a wonderful week. Hope you are enjoying the warmth if you're down here in the South. Really enjoying the warmth. Some of my popcorn popped on the cob, so you know it's toasty. You know it's summertime. Guys, remind you to get out there, sow those seeds of liberty, and we can all reap sheaves of freedom together. I'm gonna ride a hustler's dream.